Hello, Sherwood Still, talking to you from the Shiloh Civil War battlefield. This was one of General Grant's victories here, but it wasn't an easy victory. He almost lost. When I say he, I'm talking about all of his troops. General Johnston was the Confederate commander. He was a very qualified Confederate commander, but on this battlefield, he lost his life. He was shot in the leg and bled out. So the South here at this battlefield lost a very competent commander, and General Grant won. 23,000 people lost their lives here in this battlefield, and right behind me is a trench filled with Confederate graves, Confederate soldiers that were hustled into a trench and buried quickly because the Confederates needed to get out of here, and they needed to fall back. So this is what I am here talking to you about, because things are never simple. You can't just say this, cut and dry this. For instance, let's talk for a minute about General Robert E. Lee. Everybody remembers Robert E. Lee as the Confederate general that led the Confederate Army. But a lot of people don't realize or even know or want to pay attention or admit is that Robert E. Lee only spent maybe 4 years in the Confederate Army. He spent 31 years in the United States Army. He was a respected colonel when he resigned from the Army. And before he resigned, after 31 years of service, President Lincoln called him into his office and offered him command of the United States Army. Did Robert E. Lee say, turn that assignment down right away? No. He was torn. This was a catch-22 for Mr. Robert E. Lee, later to be General Robert E. Lee. 31 years in the United States Army. This is his 31-year career, and now the President of the United States is offering him the dream shot, command of all the United States Army. So he went back to his home, which is now in Arlington Cemetery, and he paced the floor all night. And in the morning, he wrote a short resignation letter, and he cited the reason he had to resign. He couldn't accept command of the United States Army. He wanted to, but he could not, in good conscience, shoot or draw his sword against his own people of Virginia. He could not envision himself marching into Virginia and shooting up his own hometown. Think about how many people in today's military would be willing to go to their hometown and shoot it up. These are very, very severe and hard decisions to make. This is one that Robert E. Lee made. After he resigned, he got on his horse and rode into Virginia. He was not planning on being a military professional for the Confederacy. He just resigned from 31 years in the United States Army. He just wanted to be a man. He just didn't want to draw a sword. But as time and political pressure grew and as casualties mounted, and he was talked into getting in and taking a lead in the Confederate Army. He didn't start off as leading the Confederate Army as a whole, but he eventually did. And as I said, this place was one of General Grant's victories, although a very hard one and barely won victory. And a couple of years later, General Robert E. Lee would surrender to General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. So these are some things to think about. When you realize the Civil War, how costly it was, brother against brother, this ground here is hallowed ground. There it is. These Confederate soldiers that are buried over there, hastily thrown into a trench, covered up, and then the Confederate Army rushes out of here in retreat. Now here's something else to consider. I'm a fan of Mr. Larry Elder, and he has pointed out the fact that Barack Obama's family tree owned slaves. There's something to think about. Mr. Barack Obama, his heritage, owned slaves. Now, these Confederate soldiers were fighting for the South. What are the odds that in this mass grave is a distant ancestor of Mr. Barack Obama? This is a possibility. If they were slave owners, they could have been fighting, and they could have been here at Shiloh, and one of them could be buried in there. Only way to know is to dig up all the bodies and do DNA search, which is not important. But what is important is to consider how complicated the Civil War was and how complicated a fight for liberty and freedom is. And I have more to say on that. Thank you.